On February 13th, 2000, in Littleton, Colorado, 15-year-old Nick Kunselman was working his night shift at the Subway restaurant on West Coal Mine Avenue. His girlfriend, 16-year-old Stephanie Hart Grizzelle, came to wait for him and give him a ride home. Both teenagers were still coping with the trauma of the Columbine shooting less than a year earlier. They had survived the April 20th, 1999 attack, but their friend Rachel Scott had not. Nick had drawn a portrait of Rachel that hung inside the subway, and Stephanie had helped bake a cake for Rachel's family after the tragedy. The subway closed at 10 p.m., and Nick stayed behind after hours, which was illegal, to clean up while Stephanie waited inside. Stephanie had snuck out of her house for Nick, and neither of them would leave alive. In the early morning of February 14th, Valentine's Day, at 12:47 a.m., a Subway coworker driving near the sandwich shop noticed that the lights were still on, which they thought was odd. They also noticed that there was an unknown man slipping out the back door. Later, the unknown man was described as a white male, 16 to 20 years old, 5'7" to 5'8" tall, weighing 150 to 170 pounds. He was clean shaven with blondish hair, wearing blue jeans, tennis shoes, a black ball cap, and a black coat with a red lining or a red shirt. Concerned, the manager went inside and discovered both Nick and Stephanie shot multiple times to death behind the counter. The location of the Subway shop complicated jurisdiction because it sat near the point where Jefferson, Douglas, and Arapahoe counties met. Ultimately, the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office took the lead on the case. Detectives collected physical evidence, including fingerprints and shell casings, and interviewed potential witnesses. The Jefferson County Sheriff's Office quickly began an investigation. The restaurant became the official crime scene. Investigators likely collected bullet casings, possible fingerprints, and swabs for DNA, but reports of such evidence are minimal. Law enforcement followed up on hundreds of leads. They even explored whether drug trafficking was involved, but ruled that out. Despite nationwide coverage, no arrests were made, and by the early 2000s, the case went cold, leaving the families devastated.
Kelly, Stephanie's mom, remembers the night that she last saw Stephanie. She was doing her homework and getting ready for the next day. She said, "Good night, I love you," to her daughter, and headed up to sleep. The biggest challenge in this case was the lack of clear forensic evidence linking anyone directly to the murders. The subway crime scene was processed after 12:47 a.m. on February 14th. Investigators collected bullet casings, fingerprints, and swabs for DNA. This case has been submitted to DNA and to the lab multiple different times to the Colorado Bureau of Investigations, Albert I. told Denver 7. "We've done fingerprints, all the standard stuff that we do investigating a crime, and we've got nothing of those." In 2000, forensic technology was limited. Touch DNA testing, now common, wasn't yet possible. Because the crime took place in a public restaurant, the scene contained countless fingerprints and DNA traces from customers. Sorting out which belonged to the killer was extremely difficult. Another issue was the delay in discovery. The murders weren't found until hours after closing, giving trace evidence time to degrade. Gunshot residue may have been lost, and no murder weapon was ever recovered. None of the evidence tested so far had produced a confirmed match in national databases. While investigators worked carefully, the limits of early 2000s forensic science were a huge barrier. But today, there are opportunities to re-examine the evidence with modern tools. If the original evidence had been preserved, resting it with today's science would finally provide answers. In short, the crime scene was investigated as thoroughly as possible for its time, but new forensic resources may hold the key to solving it. As the case gained national coverage, hundreds of tips poured in. Unfortunately, many provided fruitless. And some individuals come forward with false confessions, hoping to insert themselves into a high-profile case. These misleading claims wasted valuable investigation time. In addition, detectives pursued a potential drug-related angle, with rumors circulating about narcotics being tied to the shop or individuals linked to the victims. According to Denver 7, investigators opened over 50 drug-related cases during the time of inquiry, but none provided direct evidence connecting Nick and Stephanie's murders to drugs.
Even more than 2 decades later, important questions remain. Law enforcement should clarify what physical evidence still is stored and whether it has been retested with today's forensic methods. Witnesses from that night should also be re interviewed. Sometimes new details emerge with time. Did anyone else see someone matching the suspect's description near the subway? Were there other possibilities for motives, such as jealousy or personal disputes, fully explored? When analyzing how the case has been handled, we see major frustration in the lack of evidence despite investigators' persistence. Law enforcement followed hundreds of leads, ruled out drug connections, and have kept the investigation open. But limited transparency about evidence testing leaves families wondering if every option has been tried. The media brought national attention and kept pressure on investigators, but also spread rumors and false confessions that distracted from solid leads. Attorneys had little role since no suspect has ever been charged. Throughout the years, both families have remained outspoken about the need for justice. Stephanie's mother, Kelly, described the pain of losing her daughter after already living through the Columbine tragedy. She reflected that it's been 20 years and there are still no answers. It's like we're stuck in that night forever. These families, however, have still shown remarkable strength. They've kept Nick and Stephanie's memory alive while calling for justice. On the 24th anniversary, Crime Stoppers increased the reward to $100,000, proof that the search for answers still continues. So, what can we expect going forward? Based on the facts, it is clear this case was not random. Nick and Stephanie were likely targeted, possibly by someone familiar with the subway. With today's forensic science, there is still real hope that preserved evidence could reveal the killer's identity. The case of Nick Kunselman and Stephanie Hart Grizzelle highlights the lasting pain of unsolved crimes and the profound impact they have on both families and communities. It underscores how even the eyewitnesses' account, collected evidence, and national media coverage, justice is not always guaranteed, especially when initial leads are vague and false information clouds investigation.